the more demand you can pool, the less single occupancy vehicles you will have on the road, and the more you will be able to solve congestion problems, air pollution, etc. Yeah.
Yes, let's try this. We'll facilitate for you. You know, gives you that momentum to speed up and actually even regulate faster.
Hello from Wahat Al Karama in Abu Dhabi. On today's episode of the IAA Mobility Visionary Club, we are taking an up-close look at how cities are integrating autonomous driving into their urban landscapes. And we've got some fascinating insights to share with you. That's coming up on the IAA Mobility Visionary Club. How will autonomous driving be integrated into the cities of tomorrow? Newly planned cities play an important role. They can be laboratories for experimentation. But what about historic city centers? What does autonomous driving look like there? And can autonomous driving really reduce CO2 emissions? Here to break down these topics in this episode of the IAA Mobility Visionary Club, I'm pleased to have two special guests. The first, Hassan Al-Hasani. He's the CEO of Bayanat. Hassan, thank you for having us here in Abu Dhabi, and it's wonderful to have you on the panel.
It's a pleasure having you around, and it's a privilege to be part of this event.
Thank you. And I'm also joined here by someone with deep experience in the automotive sector, Ingmar Schaefer of Boston Consulting Group. You're a principal, and you've been working here for more than a decade, and you're currently based in Dubai.
That's correct. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful
Thanks,
to
Sarah.
have you. Let me open it up with a bit of an icebreaker and ask you guys to put on your thinking caps and use your imagination a little bit to fill in this sentence. In 10 years, the infrastructure of cities and municipalities will no longer be comparable to today because... Ingmar, you want to jump in?
Sure, because the future of mobility is here. And what that means is that the mobility mix that we are used to today, public infrastructure, the metros, the buses, you name it, will transform, and the future mobility mix will look different.
What's your view?
I think I would second that in a way, but in a word, I would say MaaS, which is mobility as a service, where all the different discrete transportation systems of today becomes more integrated into one overall shared services of mobility.
We've been talking a lot in our last episode about how autonomous mobility is going to enrich people transportation in cities. I'd love to get each of your views. Are we going to achieve full intermodality, or will only a few modes of transport remain? What's your vision?
So, as I was just mentioning, the MaaS itself, or mobility as a service, is the key component. It's how to disrupt the current or the today discrete private transportation into a shared service type of mobility that can be shared across the entire population. We can see right now in the new generations, the utilization of scooters, bicycles, and so forth inside the city becomes a trend. So by providing that shared services, shared mobility services, shared rides from different locations of the cities or even the urban areas into the city center, then they can actually from there, launch through their, other services, other mobility vehicles like the scooters or bicycles and everything. So that will change the entire spectrum of this model or this capability. With autonomous systems coming into play, it will provide or pave the way to such capability. So people will tend to utilize that convenience of maybe sitting without any interaction with the road, less stress from the road. The roads become more practical with the right speed, the right artificial intelligence to support, the locations and the directions and destinations and so forth. Becomes more convenient to sit back, relax, reach my destination or the center of my destination, and from there I can excel with less and more practical means of transportation.
More practicality and more convenience sounds wonderful to me as a consumer. Ingmar, give us the 30,000-foot view on what this is doing to cities in general. What is the impact of autonomous mobility?
Well, I would say if you take a bit of a visionary view, think about a seamlessly integrated, maybe even digitally enabled system, similar to, let's say, an expanded Uber, right? That's something that brought a lot of ease of use to end consumers. And if you now imagine, let's take the example of my trip here to Abu Dhabi, right? I have to admit, I took the car, right? Very, very boring internal combustion engine. Now, if I had an app that would allow me, I say Dubai, this location to Abu Dhabi, and then gives me the whole spectrum of options, right? I can take the budget option, an e-scooter to the next, let's say, robo-shuttle station that then, like a bus today, but autonomously driven, brings me to Abu Dhabi, to, let's say, the more high-end version where I book a private autonomous car and it takes me to the next VTOL, which is kind of flying taxis, and I fly to Dubai, and all, seamlessly integrated in an app, payment process integrated, one click, and I know how to get there.
It's a wonderful vision. It sounds almost utopian in its ease and convenience. How far away is that, do you think?
I believe we're not too far. From a conceptual perspective, the technology is there. It's more, I think, the key challenge, of course, is the regulation, first of all. And then, of course, there's always this unpredictability. When with every technology, especially when it comes to artificial intelligence or analytics, the key component that you have to factor in is unpredictability, the non-controlled environment. So you're in a city where, you cannot predict the movement of the people, the reaction of a driver, the, unforeseen drop of a tree or, other environmental noise around it. So that requires time to build. We always look at artificial intelligence as a young child that can, learn by the day, get more acquainted with its environment, and becomes more and more accurate. So we have the key components ready. To some extension, of course, when it comes to VTOL, we're still maybe a few steps behind, but we're reaching that aspect. But we have the key components ready. What needs to be done right now is to increase the amount of autonomous systems into our environment, so we can improve the capability and have that level of confidence where we can say, yes, we can actually take it to another level. That on one side, and then the commercial aspect or the financial aspect to it as well is another challenge, because to do all these kind of sensing capabilities, to move from a regular combustion engine to electrification and so forth, will require investments, will require additional cost and so forth. So those two elements are the key factors right now. And I think we are in quite a good progress so far.
You mentioned regulators, so maybe just a quick follow-up. You have deep experience here because you're running Taxi, the autonomous cab here in Abu Dhabi. You've had to work with regulators to get that on the road. I was lucky enough to take a little drive in one yesterday. It is pretty cool to see that wheel just turn itself. What was the experience like working with regulators? And what advice would you give someone in another city who says, I want to work with regulators to bring my vehicles onto the road, but it's complicated?
So I have to start with saying, we are blessed as a company to have such a leadership vision here in the United Arab Emirates in general, and Abu Dhabi specifically. So the interaction with the Integrated Transportation Center of the Department of Municipality and Transportation was more enthusiastic. Our session with them was more about how can we facilitate, what can we do to make it happen? Mm-hmm. That kind of mentality or that kind of reaction helped, speed up the process. And then, we took each element step by step. So we're always saying, at level 3, we have a safety officer in the car. At level 4, there's no driver, no safety officer at all. So all the cars that we launched in phase 1, although it is L4 enabled, so level 4 enabled, we maintained the existence of a safety officer for the people to be more comfortable and convenient to use it, and for regulations to be easier for us to actually proceed. We set specific phases. So phase 1, successfully it was in last November, gave us more of a landscape to say, yes, based on our results, based on our accuracy level, we can expand further geographically. We expand further in terms of the type of vehicles used, moving into the level 4 as well. So that paves the way to even faster progress with regulations and so forth. Seeing is believing, as they say. So that initial push from the government that says yes, let's try this, we'll facilitate for you, gives you that momentum to speed up and actually even regulate faster to the future.
Abu Dhabi is definitely a unique environment when it comes to introducing autonomous mobility to the streets. The streets are wide, they're kind of made for cars. Ingmar, what could this look like in other cities that are perhaps not as enthusiastic or welcoming as a regulatory environment, or just simply geographically more complex?
Well, it really depends on what type of city you're looking at, right? Abu Dhabi and as well as Dubai, I would say, are special in the sense that they are geographically quite distributed, right? Take the example of Dubai. You have a central area around downtown and the IFC. You have the Palm, you have the Dubai Marina, right? To connect those areas with, let's say, robo-shuttle solutions, which could, revolutionize public transport, is more difficult than in a city such as New York, right? Where you have one city center, everything is centered around Manhattan, where people commute daily for work, on the weekend for entertainment. It's much easier to pool demand and into shared vehicles, right? And that, in the end, enables cities to benefit from it. Because think about it, the more demand you can pool, the less single occupancy vehicles you will have on the road, and the more you will be able to solve congestion problems, air pollution, etc. Yeah.
I'm glad you introduced that environmental aspect, because I think this is an important thing to talk about. We hear a lot, autonomous driving can reduce the number of trips, but I want to challenge you guys. Is it really going to reduce the number of single occupancy trips, or is it just going to become that much more convenient to take a robo-taxi wherever I want to go, and then suddenly there are actually more cars on the road?
So convenience is, of course, an appealing perspective to the whole program. But when you minimize, I wouldn't say eliminate, but minimize the interaction between the person and the vehicle, you have less unpredictability, you have a better response. The artificial intelligence in such cases would operate in a better sensing capability. So it will definitely decrease the amount of stoppage, decrease the amount of accidents on the street. It will maintain consistent speeds. So, acceleration and deceleration becomes more organized. And thus, of course, it's going to have an impact on the congestions on the street, on the flow of traffic along the streets. That from one side. And in another hand, of course, we also, when we talk about the infrastructure itself, if the vehicle at some point, right now we're looking at the vehicle, its sensors and how it's becoming aware of its situation. But moving forward towards V2X or vehicle to environment, then you have that interaction between the vehicle, the other elements of the environment around it will also facilitate much faster transportation. So the drop-off points become less congested, the take-up or pick-up points as well become less congested. So all these elements that impact the time will have an impact on the traffic flow and so forth. So logically speaking, of course, it's going to have that kind of impact.
What could be, go ahead.
I think Hassan is really spot on there. And maybe to complement this perspective, BCG has run together with the University of St. Gallen a year-long study. And one of the results was that in LA, you could save per annum 2.7 million tons of CO2 emissions. That sounds like a lot, given that Bill Gates estimates, I think current CO2 emissions are around 50 billion tons per annum. It's a drop in the ocean, but it's a starting point. And if every city has its contribution, then it becomes impactful.
Yeah.
And pollution is not only the emission, but the noise, the other pollution of the street. It's the impact will be eco-friendly in overall perspective. Not only that, when speaking about Los Angeles, for example, the congestion on the 405 during rush hours, it's it's killing. It's stressful. It's a lot of noise, a lot of other elements. That entire scene is pollutant. So by consistently developing a program where you can minimize that kind of rush hour jam and rush hour traffic, you can improve the environment and overall, and definitely emission will be a key factor into that as well.
I think anyone who has experienced the 405 at rush hour, or really almost any time, will agree that a solution needs to be found. It's ripe for disruption. So what digital solutions can support making autonomous mobility more ubiquitous in cities? What needs to happen?
I mean, for me, this is clearly about, I would say, two factors, right? It's the ease of use, and that comes through a digitally integrated platform, as I described in my vision, right? How you book the mobility solution, the service that will be decisive for consumers, and the pricing on the other hand, right? But if in the end, using, let's say, an advanced Uber solution that really connects all mobility solutions within a city becomes cheaper for the end consumer and more affordable, then I don't see any reason why people would not switch from private cars to using such a infrastructure.
Definitely second that, but also I think from cost perspective, now one of the key elements is the sensing or the sensors on the car. So when we talk about the price of LiDARs, for example, today, or radars, or cameras, all that integration between them, cost is quite high. But just like any technology today, when the launch of a 80-inch screen TV today is maybe 10,000, you wait a year or two, and it becomes even half of that. So that progression in terms of economical pricing of that, sensors that needs to be integrated will pave the way, because then it becomes more price effective. It becomes more efficient for people to say, I'm going to switch. That is more convenient to me. And as a service, you want to provide that service with the minimum amount of financial impact on the person himself. When we talk about day-to-day transportation and commuting, owning a car today could be much cheaper than going through this transportation day in, day out, 365 days a year. So that has to be comparative, and not even comparative, but challenging even. So we need to reach a point where, for publicly, we're saying, yes, going with a shared transportation or mobility as a service is convenient, it's financially feasible for me as a person.
I think we've seen that for consumers with ride-hailing apps. If you had told me 20 years ago you're going to get in this stranger's car and be really happy about it, I would have doubted you. But, it's cheaper, it's more convenient, and people are willing to do that. So I think you're spot on in that. I want to give you a chance. We could talk about this all day, but I'm conscious of the time. And I want to give you each a chance to answer the question, are you optimistic about the future of autonomous mobility in urban spaces? And if you are, why? And if not, also, why not? Ingmar?
Obviously I'm optimistic.
I was hoping you would say that.
I can provide a few, let's say, facts and figures that came out of the aforementioned study. We looked at different KPIs and, how a city can also tailor their offering to mobility needs in the city, which might be very different from Berlin to New York to LA, right? And one very astonishing fact for me was that in London, for instance, the simulation resulted in 60% lower fatalities caused through traffic. Or New York was also a very astonishing outcome. New York could save in terms of parking space, right? That's also an issue coming out of the current system, let's say, could save up to 900 blocks of parking space, which is the equivalent to close to 6 central parks. So think about all this space that's suddenly freed up and what you could do with it. So I'm very optimistic that these benefits will be harvested in the future.
6
central parks, that is going to stay with me. Hassan, how do you feel?
We definitely have to be optimistic. We are in this business, right? But it's not only optimism. I think it's more inevitable. The way that the technology is now becoming, faster and faster, and especially, after the couple of pandemic years that we had in 2020 and 2021, autonomous systems become more highly, on demand. You can imagine delivery without, human interaction, driving from one place to another without human interaction. This actually picked up the pace. So optimism and demand is meeting into this program. So logically, I'm assuming that it's going to pick up quickly. The difference will be in the infrastructure itself. So when we talk about the streets in many cities in Germany, or like, of course, in the United Arab Emirates or Abu Dhabi or Dubai, the infrastructure is ready to embrace that kind of technology. Other cities might not be as fast, but that will pave the way. So it's where you implement, how you implement. There are a lot of aspects to it. So from 5G or communication to the IoT around the IOV in the car or the Internet of Vehicles, the Internet of Things. All of these elements are complementary to make this vision become a reality. And I think it's now becoming more competitive, or greatly competitive, in a way that it's even speeding up the pace even further than expected or anticipated.
Yeah, certainly it feels a little bit futuristic to be here in Abu Dhabi and see the taxis that can really drive themselves. Guys, thank you so much for shedding some light on the future of autonomous mobility in cities. It was a real pleasure having you both. Hassan Al-Hasani, Bayanat, thank you, and Ingmar Schaefer of Boston Consulting Group, thank you for your time. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the IAA Mobility Visionary Club. If you enjoyed the chat, we hope that you will check out our other episodes where we're taking deep dives into the business case and the technology behind autonomous driving. I'll see you soon.